All right, so we're diving into ancient Rome today, and specifically, we're tackling Jupiter. You guys sent in a ton of excerpts about this Roman god, so obviously we're not dealing with newbies here.
Not at all.
But this isn't going to be your basic Jupiter 101. We're going way beyond God of the sky stuff.
Right, right. It's fascinating how Jupiter wasn't just some distant god, like way up on a mountain somewhere.
Exactly.
He was a constant presence for the Romans. You see it in everything from their politics to, their campfire stories.
And speaking of politics, it seems like Roman leaders were constantly trying to get on Jupiter's good side.
Oh, absolutely. Roman politics, you can't separate them from their relationship with Jupiter.
Yeah.
Leaders, they were obsessed with having his favor.
I'm seeing it in these sources everywhere. Like they're swearing oaths in his name. They're offering these huge sacrifices after a victory, almost like a, see, Jupiter, we won, so you got to be happy kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. And the best example of that is this thing called the spolia opima. It was a ritual, super symbolic, where, get this, a Roman general who defeated an enemy king, like one-on-one, would then dedicate the king's armor to Jupiter Feretrius.
Hold on. Jupiter Feretrius? Is that another name for Jupiter?
Bingo. Romans loved their epithets for gods, little add-ons, basically, to show a specific side of the god. So Feretrius links Jupiter to victory, to spoils of war. It's not just showing off, it's saying, hey, Jupiter's the one who gave us this win.
So basically, Jupiter's on our side, but way fancier.
Exactly. And it wasn't just the emperors and generals. Even the regular folks in Rome, the plebeians, they saw Jupiter as this powerful force for justice.
Right. You're talking about how they dedicated the Mons Soxer to Jupiter, but it's interesting. It wasn't just any Jupiter. It was Jupiter Territor.
That's the key difference. That name, Jupiter Territor, it emphasizes his role as protector, not just of Roman land, but of its people too. And for the plebeians, who were always fighting for basic rights, this act, dedicating this place to Jupiter, it shows even they saw him as being on their side.
It really changes how you imagine Roman society. Jupiter's not just for the elite, he's more universal. But let's not forget, he's not just a political figurehead. This is a god with myths and legends attached.
Definitely. And these stories, they're just as important as any ritual when it comes to understanding how the Romans felt about Jupiter.
All right, let's get into it. Who doesn't love a good myth?
Well, there's the story of King Numa, this really wise and pious ruler, and he actually tricked Jupiter into revealing how to stop lightning.
Wait, hold up. Tricked Jupiter? That seems like a bold move for a king.
It shows you how the Romans saw their gods. Powerful, for sure, but not totally untouchable. You could reason with them, maybe even outsmart them a little.
I kind of like their style, but it wasn't always smooth sailing, right? Wasn't there that story about King Tullus Hostilius and how he learned the hard way that Jupiter didn't mess around?
Oh yeah, definitely a cautionary tale. Unlike Numa, this Tullus guy, he didn't care much for religious stuff and, well, let's just say he had a very shocking encounter with one of Jupiter's lightning bolts.
Subtle, Jupiter subtle, so respect the god, or else.
Exactly. These stories, they show you how the Romans saw Jupiter as powerful, yes, but also as someone they could negotiate with. You could earn his favor, but you could also lose it big time. And that leads us to the many faces of Jupiter, literally. We can't talk about him without mentioning all his different epithets.
Bring on the epithets. We've already had Feretriuses and Territor, but there's got to be more. What about the big one, Jupiter Optimus Maximus? That just sounds important.
It means the best and greatest, so yeah, not subtle at all. This was like his most popular title, showing he's at the top, the king of the gods.
But he wasn't just a one-trick god, right? There was Jupiter Pluvius, Jupiter Tonans, Jupiter Victor. It's like they saw him everywhere.
Right. Each name shows how the Romans felt Jupiter's influence all around them. In the rain, the thunder, their victories in battle.
Like a divine Swiss Army knife, always the right tool for the job.
Speaking of which, didn't Jupiter Stator, the Stayer, help out some Roman soldiers once? Talk about divine intervention. Yeah. They say he literally stopped these fleeing Roman soldiers dead in their tracks, gave them a chance to rally and win the battle. It wasn't just a name. It was a way for Romans to connect directly with Jupiter, ask for his help.
So I've got Jupiter the politician, Jupiter the myth, Jupiter the multitasker. Is there anything this god didn't do?
Well, even a god as powerful as Jupiter wasn't alone. He's got a whole other world of relationships within the Roman pantheon, like a cosmic soap opera, if you will.
Ooh, now that's what I call divine drama. Tell me more. Who are Jupiter's allies in this celestial showdown?
Well, we see one of the earliest with the archaic triad. You got Jupiter, Mars, the god of war, and then there's Quirinus.
Quirinus. Okay, that name is ringing a very faint bell. We might need a quick refresher.
He's a bit of a mystery, honestly. Even for, mythology experts, no one's completely sure. Some think he was an old Sabine god, absorbed into the Roman pantheon later on.
So we've got Jupiter, king of the gods, ruler of the sky, Mars, the ultimate warrior, and Quirinus, the wild card. What does that say about the Romans back then, even with this early group of gods?
It's fascinating, right? It matches up with this idea of three social classes, super common in ancient Indo-European cultures. Priests, warriors, and then the everyday folks, the people working the land. Each god represents one of those roles, with Jupiter obviously being the top dog, the priestly class.
So the pantheon is basically a social studies lesson. Jupiter's not just powerful on his own, he represents the whole power structure.
Exactly, but Roman society, it wasn't stuck in time, and neither were their gods. That archaic triad, it eventually takes a back seat to the more famous group, the Capitoline triad. This time it's Jupiter, Juno, his wife, and Minerva, goddess of wisdom.
All right, now we're talking. It's giving very much divine power couple, plus their super smart best friend.
Right. And that shift, going from the archaic triad to this Capitoline triad, it shows how their focus changed. Less about these strict social roles, more about, a divine family running the show. You've got Juno, protector of marriage, women in Minerva. With crafts, strategic thinking, it rounds out Jupiter's whole ruler vibe.
Makes sense even a god king needs backup. And this divine dream team, they weren't just hanging out on some cloud, right? The Romans threw some pretty impressive parties in their honor, didn't they?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus, the most impressive temple in all of Rome, was dedicated to the whole Capitoline triad. Talk about a statement.
The Romans did not mess around. And what about those Ludi Romani? That was like their Super Bowl, right? Chariot races, gladiators, the works.
Exactly. Every September, in honor of Jupiter. But it wasn't just games. It was the event, a way for the Romans to flex their power, show their pious, celebrate victories, all with a little help from their favorite god, of course.
Let's see. Jupiter gets this massive temple and then an epic party every year.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking this god had it pretty good.
He wasn't complaining. But it's important to remember, these events, they weren't just for the wealthy and powerful. Everyone was invited. Senators, shopkeepers, even slaves. Everyone came together as Romans, with their gods watching over them.
Okay, so we've got political Jupiter, legendary Jupiter, the Jupiter who gets a temple the size of a small city and an annual festival. But it wasn't all politics and parties, right? He's still the god of the sky, which I'm guessing was a pretty big deal for a society based on agriculture.
You got it. Jupiter controls the weather, good harvests, it's all connected. And the Romans, they took their agriculture very seriously. You see it in all these festivals and rituals connected to Jupiter.
Like what? Give me an example.
The Venalia festivals, for instance. Actually, there were two. The Venalia Priora in April, when they'd offer the first wine of the year to Jupiter, and then the Venalia Rasudica in August, prayers for good weather for the grape harvest.
So, less party time. More like, don't let our grapes die, Jupiter.
Basically, it shows how in tune they were with the seasons and how Jupiter was a part of that.
It's like a cosmic insurance policy, but instead of paperwork, it's grapes. But really, it makes you think every storm, every sunny day, a good harvest, it was all Jupiter somehow.
Absolutely. And that leads to something else about Jupiter, something that adds a whole other layer to his story.
Okay, you've got my attention. What could be more interesting than a god who gets temples, games, and basically runs every part of life?
Well, see, even with all that power, there were still some things that even Jupiter couldn't totally control.
All right, you've definitely got my attention. What could be bigger than Jupiter? Did the Romans have, a super god they prayed to when Jupiter was off duty?
Not a super god, exactly. But there's this figure, Veove. Sometimes it seems like he's a separate god. Other times, he's more of a side of Jupiter himself.
Veove. Okay, I haven't heard that one before. Is this another epithet thing? We've got Jupiter the victorious, now get ready for Jupiter the vengeful.
Not quite. This is where it gets interesting. We've talked about Jupiter Optimus Maximus, right? Order, stability, all that good stuff. But the Romans, they knew that life, even with gods involved, it's not always pretty.
You mean sometimes the crops fail or, barbarians attack, even if you've done all the right sacrifices to Jupiter?
Exactly. And that's where Veove comes in. He's like, the other side of the coin.
Yeah.
The raw, untamed forces,
Yeah.
the stuff that even Jupiter can't completely control. Earthquakes, volcanoes erupting.
Yeah.
That kind of unpredictable chaos.
So Jupiter had to accept that sometimes things just happen. That's kind of humbling when you think about it. Did the Romans do anything with this Veovi idea, like rituals or anything? Or was he more of a hide under the bed and hope for the best kind of god?
Oh, they definitely acknowledged him. He had his own temple in Rome, on Tiber Island, of all places. And get this, his festival was January 1st.
Starting the year by paying respects to the god of chaos. Bold move. Think they were trying to head off any potential disasters? A little cosmic insurance for the new year?
It's an interesting thought, right? But it also tells us something about how the Romans saw the world. They got that life has both sides, light and dark, order and chaos. And they weren't afraid to recognize that, even in their religion.
It makes you think about how often we try to simplify things, put everything in a neat little box. The Romans, they seem to have had a more realistic outlook.
Absolutely. And maybe that's something we can learn from, even now. Life is full of surprises, good and bad, and maybe there's a balance in that, even when it's unexpected.
So let's bring this back to Jupiter. We started with a god of the sky, then we met the politician, the party animal, the protector of harvests, and now we end with this darker, wilder side. Quite a journey.
That's what happens when you really dig into something, isn't it? Always something more to learn.
We definitely did some digging today, and for everyone listening, we hope this deep dive into Jupiter has you thinking about Roman mythology, how ancient cultures saw the world, all the big questions they were trying to answer.
Because those stories, those gods, they still have something to tell us, even thousands of years later, about ourselves, the world around us, even the things we can't control.
Well said. And on that note, we'll leave you with this thought. Next time you see a big thunderstorm, or maybe you're raising a glass to a good harvest, take a second to think about Jupiter, his chaotic family, all those stories they represent. Might just find a little ancient wisdom hidden in there.